Hello, everyone. This is OGV Energy Live. Wherever you are in the world, welcome. My name is Eric Doyle, and this is our Hydrogen CCS issue, coming to you from a rather damp Aberdeen city centre. This is our interactive show, live stream show, which brings you news and insight from across the energy sector and brings to life the UK's leading energy industry publication, of course, OGV Energy Magazine. I'll get the photo shot in there while I can. Say hello, tell us where you are. I'll just see if anyone's jumped in yet in our chat. Hello to Saeed. Saeed, everyone gets a shout out on this show. Hello to Andrew Slesser. Great to have you with us, Andrew. Hello to Emils, to B. Jai, to Justin Hoffman joining us from Houston, I think, or maybe he's in Aberdeen already, getting ready for offshore Europe. Hello to David, Nicola, and James. If you could do exactly what these lovely people have done and just let us know where you are in the world. Also, let us know who you work for, and your marketing team will love you. Your leadership team will love you. Give us a nice message from where you are in the world, who you work for, and where you are and what you're doing. And if you're involved in this hydrogen CCUS space that we're about to talk about, we'd love to know about that too. Thanks to those of you who keep coming back to join us. This show would be nothing without our guests. If you're new to the show, each month we feature interviews and discussions with our partners from across the publication that month and across the wider energy industry. We want to update you on all the latest news and opinions on a specific related topic every month. Today, we're going to explore and unpack the very latest in hydrogen and carbon capture, utilization and storage. And we're going to be meeting some really special people at the leading edge of that industry today. In our industry spotlight feature today, we have Neil Rimmer, principal consultant from VYSUS Group. We have Mike Adams, CEO of Elemental Energies, and we have Stuart Duncanson joining us from who's the hydrogen technology manager from Hydrasun. We'll also be hearing all the very latest in what's happening in our markets, with a particular sway towards hydrogen with Diveena Danablalan from the EIC, and new to the show, Joyce Grigory from Westwood Global Energy Group, who's the director of hydrogen there. And we have a little treat for you at the end of the show, something to do with offshore Europe that's going to really interest you. We've got a little treat, so stay with us. Remember, we run a little incentive for the best comment and question of the day. The best comment and question put to any of our guests in the chat today is going to win a half-page article or advert in a future edition of the OGV Energy Magazine. So keep your questions and comments coming in, and remember to say hello. If you ask a great question or make a great comment, I'll put it to our guests. That's how we work it here. Now, to the topic at hand. I'll just clear my throat in readiness. The drive for sustainable technologies in recent years has been fueled with efforts to decarbonize industries through advancements in energy storage, hydrogen production, and carbon capture and storage and utilization, to name a few, proving to be pivotal in achieving our ambitions in our net zero economy. Hydrogen in particular has been deemed as the most promising alternative to fossil fuel sources and has a vast array of uses in sectors ranging from transport to heating and everything in between. The UK government has committed to a hydrogen strategy, which is going to support innovation in each segment of the hydrogen value chain: production, conversion, storage, and transport. However, at present, there remain several key areas of uncertainty surrounding each of the above, with significant research being required to ensure the safe, efficient, and cost-effective integration of hydrogen in our current infrastructures. To examine all of this in more detail and get into the real bones of all of this, we're going to bring in our headline guest today. I'm going to start with, if I can find him on my list, we have Nigel Holmes, the Chief Executive Officer at SHIFCA, the Scottish Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association. Hello, Nigel, how are you?
Eric, good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be here again.
Fantastic. Great to have you back. Yeah, terrific. Looking forward to a good show?
Absolutely. Plenty to cover, Eric, plenty to cover.
But you're not single-handed, Nigel. We have a team with you here. Our next guest today is Martin McCormack, Director for CCS and Hydrogen at the ETZ, the Energy Transition. Hello, Martin. How are you?
Eric, good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to all our viewers. And as David and others have said in the chat, welcome to a very sunny Aberdeen.
So, very sunny. It didn't start off so much this morning, Martin.
Shh, don't tell. Big sell for next week, Eric. Weather's always good in Aberdeen.
I had echoes of the phrase from the Game of Thrones that winter's coming. It's definitely coming. Our last guest today, certainly by any means not least, is the Chief Impact Officer at the Net Zero Technology Centre. Please welcome Roy Stenhouse. Hello, Roy.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the show. It's my first chance to join you, so I'm super excited.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. I'm just going to take this opportunity just while we're here to say hello to some of our guests. Brittany has joined us. Hello, Brittany Hoovey. To see you. We've got Mugera, Roberto. We've got a whole heap of people. Welcome to the show. Remember, and tell us who you are, and tell us who you're working for, and tell us if you have an interest in the subject that we're going to be talking about with these lovely people: hydrogen, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. My first question of the day is pretty much to the group. There's a phrase that I love that we've seen. Anybody who's been reading up about hydrogen CCS gets to see this phrase. I'm surprised it's not on T-shirts. Maybe we'll see some at offshore Europe. Make it, move it, use it. A really good phrase. Now, to unpack that, it's a catchy phrase. I really like it. I thought we could do a round robin, maybe starting with you, Nigel, on make it. Could you give us a bit of an idea about what make it is all about?
Yes, of course, Eric. So make it, the very first thing we do is we need to produce the hydrogen. So hydrogen doesn't exist. Well, there's virtually none of it available in nature. It's not like oil or gas where you go and find a big reservoir of hydrogen, although there might be some natural hydrogen kicking around if you're lucky. But 99.9% of hydrogen will be produced from other sources. So you need an energy input. So that energy input could be electricity. We can use the electricity to split hydrogen, or it could be some of the energy, for example, in a fossil fuel like methane. You can crack methane, steam methane reformers to make hydrogen and carbon dioxide. And this is where the bit about the carbon capture and storage becomes critical. So you take the CO2, you store it safely, and you end up with hydrogen with a low or zero carbon footprint. And this is all about making low carbon hydrogen to decarbonize. You mentioned your heat, your transport, and also industry is one of the really big application areas. So this is the first stage, the production of the hydrogen, and then we go on to the next bit, which is the move it.
Roy, could you move it for us?
I'd love to be able to move it for you, Eric. Once we start producing this at scale, there is various ways of genuinely moving it, and some of the activities that we have been undertaking here is to look at shipping, to look at pipelines, and there's various other methods out there. And currently, nothing is currently available at the scale we're talking about. So when we get that chance to move it, we really are talking about probably pipelines and major shipping opportunities. That's the most likely routes. I think that anything else will be, well, I'll be very interested if we can do anything that Star Trek could do, but at the moment it's going to be pipelines or it's going to be shipping, and I certainly see that happening across the globe just now. So pipeline and shipping, go for it. That's what
very good. And Martin, I'm a big rugby fan. I never made it to referee level, but I've always wanted to scream use it at a scrum half. So the use it part, could you fill us in on that?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I see you've left probably the hardest part of this equation to last. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's worth highlighting again another plug for Aberdeen. I think it's fair to say we're an international recognized hydrogen pioneering city, and that's because we've got about a decade of experience in terms of using hydrogen for transport. And probably hydrogen for road transport is probably the lowest hanging fruit at the moment. And this is the actual focus of the current project that some of the viewers may have heard of, the Aberdeen Hydrogen Hub project, which is a joint venture initiative between BP and Aberdeen City Council, and the entity is called BP Aberdeen Hydrogen Energy Limited, quite a mouthful. And their project's going to be fortunately based within the geography of the energy transition zone, and they're approaching final investment decision. We may come across the importance of final investment decisions going forward, but that's when a project will become a reality. But as mentioned, transport isn't enough on its own to really scale up the use of hydrogen, and I think there's two main opportunities currently around industry, and one is in the UK. We have 6 industrial clusters, some of them enabled by CCS. Many of them are looking to fuel switch to the use of low carbon hydrogen as part of their way of decarbonizing industry. And then finally, back to the point made earlier, the potential for large scale export. And one very significant industry market that's emerging is Germany. And we may touch upon that more going forward. So Hopefully, I didn't give away a penalty there in terms of the use it description.
No, you didn't. You did. You did very well. My colleague Dan has just told me this. This always happens to me. I don't know why. It's telling me that I'm back to front. I'm mirrored. So I'm going to unmirror myself. Is that actually saying OGV now? It is. It is. I think it is. I think it is. So Dan, thank you. I am unmirrored. That's perfect. Nigel, the last time we met over a year ago, you were talking about a lot of demonstration projects. You were very much in demonstrator mode, but there's now a shift to large scale, wider deployment. Could you give us some of the examples of what's going on and some of the underpinning elements that are making this happen?
Yes, thanks, Eric. So what we have now happening is that the UK government is putting support into a number of projects in the UK to start scaling up the early production of hydrogen. And there's two threads to this. So I mentioned the hydrogen from electrolysis of water, and often that is using renewable electricity, and that becomes what we call green hydrogen. Other colors are available. So if you start with natural gas, and if you use steam methane reformer to make the hydrogen and the CO2, and if you capture the CO2, that becomes the blue hydrogen. So green and blue, two types of low carbon hydrogen. We can start talking about whites and yellows and others, but let's stick with the green and the blue for the time being. And two examples of what's actually happening in the UK. So a few weeks ago, there was an announcement about it was actually slightly eclipsed by the announcement of the drilling for oil and gas, but it was an announcement about the Acorn carbon capture storage project in St Fergus, getting the go-ahead onto track 2. And Martin will be able to talk about this in more detail. He's close to this one. But the important bit there is that becomes that's a stepping stone towards blue hydrogen production. You can't make blue hydrogen if you haven't got the carbon capture storage. So the Acorn CCS project becomes the enabler for the Acorn Hydrogen project, which is also being developed by Storegga. And within the green hydrogen space, there's a lot of support coming in from the UK government for production of electric hydrogen. There's 17 proposals that are being evaluated going forward. About 250 megawatts of hydrogen production capacity. So that's a good amount of tonnage. And much of that is linked to the user case actually starting to displace natural gas in industrial applications. And again, this comes back to the make it, move it, use it. If you don't have the user, then the business case for the making it becomes very, very weak. So this is where the support from the UK government helping with the hydrogen offtake, supporting that support for the production demand is becoming absolutely critical.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, Nigel, and I think this is probably the contentious point in the whole of the conversation of hydrogen. It feels like the UK could well be behind Europe, and hence the conversation around how we're going to transport this. It's actually very possible, and some of the work that we've done in the Hydrogen Backbone Link project, which I am going to get to say that it is being announced this week. It comes out into our website tomorrow, but it is looking like that whole export opportunity may actually engulf before our domestic markets pick up, because the Europe seem to be driving the hydrogen agenda slightly quicker than us, and that may sound odd, because I think I've heard comments like we've got to support a UK domestic first, but actually by exporting it, we do actually enable our supply chains to actually start looking at technology that can help part of that story. So even though we are considering this export route, it is equally possible that our supply chain benefit by going export first, because the demand is there. There is that risk, of course, that we miss the boat if we do focus UK centric, but we also are trying to address that. But it's interesting that we do see the UK market moving slightly differently, but how quickly they move would be very fascinating for me at the moment, because I do see a bit of a challenge ahead.
Yeah, and Roy, your point about Germany is a really good one, because they've been looking at sourcing hydrogen from international markets. They put a couple of tenders out last year, and really up to now they've been focused on getting green hydrogen, but actually they're actually becoming a bit more broader in their approach. Why? Because to scale up quickly, this is where the blue hydrogen could actually play a major part. I gave the example of 260 megawatts of electrolytic hydrogen. The Acorn hydrogen project would actually be larger than that, just one blue hydrogen project. So the blue hydrogen production units at the moment tend to be bigger than the green hydrogen projects. And that's a sense of the customer. Again, the customer is not colorblind. They recognize the differences between the green and the blue, but depending on what they're trying to achieve. So it's about carbon reduction, then green or blue, or green and blue more likely will play a major part.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, gentlemen. We've had some really nice comments coming in from our audience. I'm going to go back to those in just a second. I'll just put Roberto's off just 1 second. That's fine. That's perfect. Martin, coming to you. Is Scotland viewed as a serious global player in this hydrogen CCS world?
Yeah, it's a good question, and not to pick it up on Roy's point. I think this domestic and international market could be taken as two opportunities rather than one's better than the other. So I would certainly encourage us to look under every stone possible to try and enable a local market as part of enabling a significant market. Eric, where were you on the 31st of July of this year? Do you know what happened that was of significance? Nigel's already 31st of July.
Track 2 announcement.
Track 2 announcement. It was somewhat deflected or sabotaged or camouflaged, whatever word you want to use, by other announcement relating to oil and gas exploration licenses. But for Scotland, that was a major announcement. Unfortunately, 2 years later than we would hope for. For those on the audience that may not know, the UK government has run a CCUS sequencing competition, picking which industrial clusters in the UK would decarbonize first through the important tool of carbon capture and storage. Track 1 announcement was late-ish 2021. HyNet in northwest England and East Coast Cluster in northeast England were the two successful bids. And Scotland had a fantastic title called Track 1 Reserve. And I don't know if you've had remember the days of being at primary school where everyone gets a certificate. Some are more meaningful than others. But Track 1 Reserve basically means we've been waiting for 2 years until the 31st of July with no benefits whatsoever until, thankfully, along with the Harbour Energy Viking project in the UK, again in the northeast of England, Scottish Cluster Track 2, which is enabled by Acorn CCS, was announced as being part of Track 2, which now means we can access £1 billion UK government carbon CCS infrastructure fund, which will kickstart one of the most important things we have to do, which is decarbon industry and safeguard significant amounts of jobs and potentially add huge opportunities for new green energy jobs going forward. So I think we are a key player, and that's not. And I usually do mention ScotWind. 28 gigawatts of offshore wind is usually my opening comment, but I just wanted to come back to the importance of that Track 2 announcement, as Nigel had already flagged it. Just on ScotWind very quickly, Eric, again for the benefits of the audience, 28 gigawatts came as a very pleasant surprise. This is the Scottish government offshore leasing rounds. And I think it was early 22, 28 gigawatts, 25 initially, and then a further 3 gigawatts were added east of Shetland. Way, way, way more than Scotland needs to decarbonise its businesses and industries and homes and the likes. And that's deliberate, and that plays to the potential for large-scale, in this case, green hydrogen export, using, as Roy has said, probably initially ships, and there's a lot of different views on what's the best way to ship hydrogen, whether that's liquefied ammonia, liquid organic hydrogen carriers. Maybe there'll be questions on that from the audience. But then, this really important project that NZTC have been doing on behalf of the Scottish government, which is the Scottish stroke UK stroke Ireland offshore hydrogen backbone, which will really link us up to Europe onshore backbone, which is probably more advanced in its thinking than our own. So I'm rambling, so I'll stop.
No, it was good. It was good rambling. We liked it. We liked it.
Hopefully that eventually answered part of your question.
It really did. It really did. And I'm going to go back to that question from Gavin McGill. I think it's an appropriate time. Now you've all had a bit of airtime. Gavin is asking, is the current UK domestic gas infrastructure capable of handling hydrogen? I understand calorific value is lower, so either flow or pressure goes up. Is the current solder brass pipework hydrogen leak proof? Who would like to grab that?
So I can
go for it, Nigel. Go for it, Nigel. Because I can talk the offshore network opposed to the onshore, which is probably more.
So absolutely. So we can take this in two parts. So the gas networks, there's transmission, which is a bit like motorways, and this is where Roy's and the NZTC's work on the offshore pipelines is critical. And these typically run at normally between 50 and 100 bar pressure. So these are big metal pipes, running at high pressure. You then have the gas distribution networks, which run from about 10 bar pressure down to about a tenth of a bar pressure. And these are ones that actually go along your streets, into your house. And often you'll be going along and you'll see a pile of yellow pipes at the side of the road. This is actually polyethylene pipe, and they've been replacing a lot of the older metal pipes with polyethylene. And this has been done for safety reasons, to actually improve the integrity of the low pressure network, particularly replacing old cast iron brittle pipes with the polyethylene pipes. Now, the good news is that the polyethylene pipes are totally compatible, obviously, with natural gas, and they're totally compatible with hydrogen. So the work to replace the old cast iron pipes is actually helping to set up the gas network for the future as a hydrogen network. We've also seen a couple of comments about the material challenges with hydrogen, and in particular the one of embrittlement. And there are some metals, including steels and coppers, which can embrittle with hydrogen. It's a very slippery gas. It gets into very small holes and can actually embrittle metals. But the good news is that embrittlement normally only happens above about 10 or 20 bar pressure. So when you're running low pressure networks, it's not a problem. Any evidence of that? Well, the low pressure networks used to run with Towns gas, and Towns gas was, shock horror, 50% hydrogen roughly by volume. The rest of it wasn't great. That was carbon monoxide. So that was the poisonous bit. But the experience with using hydrogen in gas networks, it's nothing particularly new there. The bit that is new is obviously starting to deploy 100% hydrogen rather than Towns gas. And this is, for example, some of the work that's going on down in Fife with SGN doing the trial called H100. And this is a really fascinating trial. They're going to use an offshore wind turbine to produce green hydrogen. And they've actually laid a parallel, or in process of laying a parallel set of pipes in the streets, goes past about 1,000 houses, 1,000 households. And they will have the choice of either staying with the existing natural gas or opting in to use green hydrogen for heat. Why would they do that? Well, there's a few benefits. You get a new boiler, you get support going through. The maintenance, you pay the same per energy unit as you would on natural gas. But the key thing for this trial isn't just about the technical performance, the commercial performance. It's, will people want to do it? Because we've seen a lot of discussions around trials happening elsewhere in the UK. And in fact, one trial, the Whitby trial, they basically canned the trial because there was not enough public acceptance of what was going on with the Whitby trial. So this is very much about, if we're going to be successful in using hydrogen for decarbonising heat or decarbonising transport, it's not just about the technology, it's not just about the economics, it's about, do people actually want to make that change?
And Eric, could I just, Roy, if I could just sneak in a little before
it's not like you, Martin.
Not like you.
Before the offshore side, just to add, that program that Nigel's alluded to, H100 in particular, is part of a UK-wide evidence build for the safety of hydrogen in our gas systems. So all the gas distribution networks, Cadent, SGN, and others, are all actively engaged in supporting a program that's been led by Ofgem. And two things to add on that, two major decisions that are coming up. One is potentially the UK government will announce its willingness to allow blending of gas, and that's where we will basically dilute the natural gas in the current system by adding hydrogen. And the point about calorific value is well made. We can put up to 20% by volume of gas. And by the way, that would mean all our current domestic appliances would work equally well. And that decision is due at the end of this year. So hold your breath. Let's see if the UK government actually delivers on that. And there's some legislation that needs to change as part of that decision making. And then the other major date is potentially the role of hydrogen, 100% hydrogen, to decarbonize our heat. That's our homes and businesses. And that is, I believe, Nigel, correct me if I'm wrong, 2026. So there's a couple of really important UK dates coming up that really will make a difference to the use it side of that equation if we if the UK government supports and gets behind hydrogen the way, for instance, the German government has got behind hydrogen.
If I can just add in, Eric,
they're stealing all your time there, Roy.
It's perfectly okay. It's a legitimate conversation because the dates are very important for everybody to understand.
Yeah.
But I'm going to carry on because I've got the limelight, you see. So I was not daft here. But if we talk a little bit about the offshore piece, which is, I think, is also important to this, the major trunk lines that are currently gas or methane based today, the work that we've done in the report that you can read hopefully at the end of this week does actually explain that these pipelines could well be repurposed for hydrogen, probably hydrogen storage rather than hydrogen transportation. The reason for that is actually their availability is actually the stopper at the moment. They're currently being used for methane and will continue to do so out to about 2040. We actually see the need for this export route to Europe potentially before that. So what we've done on the pipelines is we've assessed a number of the key gas lines. We've recognised that the existing oil lines, due to everything that's been talked on this line about the issues with the oil lines are unlikely to be repurposed for hydrogen. Number of reasons: not as clean as gas, which means every time you put hydrogen in there, it gets dirty. But we've also established, out of all the work we've done with the offshore network, is really there's not many showstoppers, with the exception of reciprocating compressors, which is the actual route to push it through the line. So actually, when you see the report, I'm looking forward to getting the comments back because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of experts out there. But the good news is we've been connected very closely with the H100 program, and they've been kind of giving us insight to what the onshore network testing is looking like. And some of the testing that we're looking at next is actually trying to put higher pressure through existing lines to understand when we do repurpose these assets in the future, hopefully, that we can use them safely. So we're actually joining forces with the H100 program because we recognise the importance of that testing to give the confidence that we can actually deliver hydrogen at scale and export it safely. So,
well, while we have you, Roy, you mentioned Hydrogen Backbone Link. For those who don't know, you've just completed the first phase of Hydrogen Backbone Link and some news expected about that tomorrow. Can you give us a wee bit of background on what the fabric of the Hydrogen Backbone Link is all about?
Indeed. So back in 2020, we recognised that the European Hydrogen Backbone project had been initiated, and sadly, with the exception of the Bacton oil terminal, or gas terminal, down in England, European Backbone did not include a connection to Scotland. So we felt that there was a real importance to really push the opportunity, particularly for green hydrogen, and everything that Martin and Nigel suggested around the amount of offshore floating wind that's being considered through Scotland. There is a real option for green hydrogen. So we spent a lot of time focusing on what this scope of work would look like. And initially it was, can we repurpose existing pipelines? So back in 2020, we went to the government and said, look, we'd like some money to do this study. We recognised that we could probably get Scotland on the map from a European perspective. And only in the last sort of 9 months, we're starting to see the three major trunk lines that are being considered for hydrogen starting to come together. So Martin Turlock, the gentleman who works for me in our net zero space, Martin's been engaged with Crew 21 and a number of other people in Europe. And we've actually started to bring not only the Scottish export opportunity together, but the Baltic Sea opportunity and the Norwegian export potential, so that we're actually all building one pipeline network rather than actually building three. So our phase one report, which is out tomorrow, is explaining all of the key technical challenges and all of the findings, the economics, and why we think there's a real chance here that this could actually unlock the potential that the UK has. But the good news is we're on that map now, which I think is a fantastic place to be, because initially it was only the Bacton terminal. Good reason behind that, by the way. There is 2 pipelines already connecting Europe from Bacton, so it made sense to include that. But we've now got ourselves firmly in that imagery for the European backbone, which was one of the key outputs. We're actually continuing the work today for another 2 years, which is actually fulfilling even more deeper dive into the technology. Being a net zero technology centre, we have to do that, but we're now looking seriously into what technology we can really fast forward now in order to enable that. There's another, Martin's talked on it, regulations. There's a few other challenges, but that's not technology. Our focus is what technology enable this line and what do we need to do to get there. So that's the next 2 years of activity, and there'll be more after that.
Yeah,
the great news is we've got fantastic industry support, and I mean fantastic. We've got the Kellises in there, we've got the Storegas in there, the Fortescues, we've got councils. We've been really fortunate to have significant backing from industry on this one. So, and I will stop rambling now. My turn.
Very good. I'm coming back to the chief rambler, Martin. Could you just we've had deep insight into Shifka. Everybody knows what NZTC's impact is on this with Roy and what he's talking about. Can you just give us a bit of a deeper dive into what ETZ is doing in this space?
Sure. Thank you, Eric. So we're a not-for-profit business development organisation focused on the northeast of Scotland region, and we've got funding from both the Scottish and UK governments, along with private sector funding as well, to develop an energy transition zone. You can see this behind me. That's the new South Harbour port, a fantastic addition to the existing infrastructure ecosystem that we have in the northeast of Scotland. And this will really enable some of that fantastic pipeline of energy transition opportunities, whether that's fixed floating winds, CCUS, direct air capture, green hydrogen production, to name but a few. So we're trying to attract new businesses towards the region, not just because we've got a nice industrial place and playground to bring your business, but because of this pipeline of opportunities. And we also have a role to support the supply chain in the region pivot towards these energy transition opportunities. I don't know if we'll have time, but just headlines there. 90% of the skills, for instance, in oil and gas are directly transferable to particularly the offshore renewable energy transition opportunities. And a lot of the supply chain companies are already making that pivot and understanding the role that they can play, taking their experience of 50 years of pioneering offshore oil and gas expertise into these new energy transition opportunities. And we try to help them through things like masterclasses and also capital challenge funds with the help of Scottish Government, I would like to plug.
On the government, a question in from Andrew Slesser. If the government does not aid the hydrogen change, is there enough engagement from businesses to go forward? Andrew doesn't mess about when he asks this question. So who would like to grab that?
Well, I think there are some areas of industry, commercial activity where there is a strong interest from businesses. I think probably the best example in Scotland is actually some of the work that's being done with the Scottish whisky sector. So just south of Aberdeen, just outside Montrose, the Arbicki distillery, they've actually just about completed a project to start to produce green hydrogen at the distillery from wind and electrolysis. And that hydrogen can be used to actually raise steam for the distilling still. And the objective is to actually produce essentially a zero carbon whiskey. And why would you do that? It's because the actual market for whiskey is a premium market. And if they can differentiate, if they can actually show that they've got a zero carbon whiskey, this is actually going to be a real attractor in certain markets. Certain consumers will look at that and say, right, I'm going to enjoy my whiskey even more because I know it's a guilt-free, zero-carbon whiskey.
Yum, yum, yum.
And Arbiki, they're an independent. They're quite a small company. They can make quick decisions. But pretty much all of the major whiskey producers are going down this path of decarbonisation. The whole sector has got a very, very explicit strategy. The Scottish Whisky Association have a strategy for decarbonising the whole of the whiskey sector, and they have some of the funds to actually make that happen. So yes, there are areas where this can happen, and there's some good examples in Scotland.
I think that example is just like talking about organic meats. It's the same principle that people do feel better about buying organic meat. Well, let's buy CO2 carbon neutral whiskey and enjoy it, even though the headache the next day might be the problem.
But there's less guilt.
There's less guilt.
There's less guilt. Martin, you had something to add?
Yeah, just I think just to add that there is a degree of industry buy-in. So I mentioned the public-private sector project, Aberdeen Hydrogen Hub, between BP and the City Council. I don't know if I actually made this point when I first described it. This is going to potentially be one of the first commercial hydrogen production projects, and it will not get to final investment decision unless there is sufficient confidence about the offtake over the next 10 years. And that's a relatively small scale. And I raise it because actually government involvement is essential to establish whether it's a CCS, blue hydrogen-enabled industry, or an offshore wind and onshore wind, for that matter, enabled green hydrogen industry. Business models, and there's all sorts of different discussions ongoing at the moment, are a key part of that. There are various shapes and sizes of business models, but some of your audience may be familiar with the contract for difference, the successful contract for difference approach that's been used to really stimulate offshore wind production. So the role for governments is going to be essential. And to be quite honest with you, even though some of these numbers sound big, they're not relatively big if you can compare them to European funding that's available, and then Inflation Reduction Act. These are very significant industry international programs that are actually competing for investment. So we need to be careful, and we need to actually really encourage government to accelerate and get these business models finalize and allow projects to get to final investment decision.
Andrew, I hope that answered your question. We've got some fantastic questions coming in. We probably won't get to all of them, but we'll try our best. And there's always the conversation that continues on when this event is live, as it is on LinkedIn and other channels. Final question from me. It's rather ridiculous to try and cram in all of the activity and all of the investment and all of the focus on hydrogen CCS into half an hour's worth of chat. We should have done a show just with you guys, and we might even do that to progress it a little bit more. But Scottish Government, 5 gigawatts of low carbon hydrogen energy by 2030, 25 gigawatts by 2024. 2.5 million tons ready for export by 2045. To the casual layman like me, that seems really ambitious targets. The question is to this group: are they achievable targets, and are we on track?
So the key here is they are achievable if there is sufficient energy input. So if you've got lots of renewables, and the indications are that with Scotland coming through, there's going to be a lot of renewables on the wires. One of the big questions will be, will the wires be able to take it all? And this is actually where this isn't just about a question of electricity or hydrogen. This is a question of how you can use both electrification and hydrogen to actually maximize the recovery of energy, renewable energy, low carbon energy, and then deliver that to markets. And so the markets could be in the UK, and there's a really good question around, why would you do hydrogen for heat if it's less efficient than electrification? Well, actually, it may be less efficient in theory, but in practice, it could be quicker to do, and it may not end up any more expensive to the user, because the way you can actually use the hydrogen to store energy, which is surplus energy, and then use it when you want it, could actually help to bring the cost of the hydrogen down. And in the same way, the demand from export markets could act as a big pull, and that will help to underpin the investments. Those investments will not just be in the hydrogen production, but it's likely to be in the wind turbines, onshore wind turbines, offshore wind turbines. This is a whole, basically, sequence of activities that, if they join together, I think we can actually deliver these targets. But it needs a lot of things to come together in terms of the market readiness, and there's a whole load of work to do around supply chain skills development. The timing of this is all challenged. So the 2030 target for Scotland, 5 gigawatts. Yes, it's probably still alive, but it's going to be a real challenge to get to that one. It's Martin can probably sort of add a few more comments in terms of how he sees it, but this is where green and blue will be critical.
Yeah, if I could, I think my answer is probably a bit shorter for a change. I don't think we'll make 5 gigawatts by 2030.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Thanks for coming.
But it's really, and the only reason for that is 2030 is approaching too fast. It's just a practical limitation about how long it takes to, particularly to plan these major sized projects. CCS Track 2 enables large-scale blue hydrogen. Nigel's already alluded to the potential scale. I think when built out, Acorn Hydrogen, which is the sister project to Acorn CCS, is about 900 megawatts of hydrogen. So what is that? That's getting up to 20% of the target. So I think blue, and by the way, INEOS down in Grangemouth are thinking about of projects of that similar scale. So I think to get to 5 gigawatts is going to require a fairly significant base load of blue, which is still low carbon hydrogen, back to the colors. And I think the challenge is going to be enabling so much renewable power, particularly offshore, for the remainder. Another number, and Roy, this is hopefully not stealing your thunder, but a plug for your report. If I remember correctly, is 15 gigawatts is one of the cases that you've worked. 15 gigawatts by 2035. Why is that important? Well, that would sort of get you to the place where you could justify an offshore hydrogen backbone linking Scotland, Ireland, and the UK to Europe. That's the scale that we need to be able to produce to get something of that sort of a significance. I hope I haven't stolen your thunder, Roy.
Not at all, but I'm going to answer the 5 gigawatt question, and I actually think I'm going to turn it around a little bit and say I think we'll have 5 gigawatts in planning by 2030. So back to Martin's point, I do believe that it's going to be a stretch to actually have that operational, but I think with the right support from government, which we're definitely starting to see, I think you'll perhaps have more than 5 gigawatts in planning by 2030, which is a slight play on, is it a target or is it just an ambition? So
fair enough, gentlemen. We're at the coming towards the end of our little session. We've got we're all very excited. Offshore Europe is back next week. 50-year anniversary, 4 years in the making. And it's been great to see, in talking to some of the people that are involved, and we will meet a very important person towards the end of the show, that there was a day when I entered this industry that the hydrogen representation at Offshore Europe was a little scientist sitting in a 3x3 with a little diagram trying to explain to people that weren't really listening. But oh my goodness, have we got a different representation of Hydrogen CCS at Offshore Europe this year. That's very exciting in its own. Nigel, you've got some other events coming up which are very exciting.
Yes, thanks, Eric. So, in fact, in Aberdeen and not very far from you as well, Eric. So we're back into Aberdeen for our annual conference. We've been up a couple of times before, and it's great to be coming back. Why? Because there's so much happening in Aberdeen. You can actually go around and catch the hydrogen bus. You can see the locations where the hydrogen's made, the refueling, and it's going to be end of October. So it's Wednesday, the 25th of October, and Thursday, the 26th. On the Wednesday, we're going to be at the OGV tap room. So Eric, just downstairs, absolutely from where you're sitting right now, and myself, Martin will be there with his team from ETZ, and we'll have a series of activities during the afternoon. Presentations about basically what's happened so far in Aberdeen, what's happening now, what's coming next, and that's warming us up for the conference, which is at P&J Live, same venue as Offshore Europe, on Thursday the 26th. So, yep, thanks, Eric, and hopefully we will see you part of the day on the 25th.
Undoubtedly. Fantastic. Yeah, looking forward to all of that, and looking forward to seeing all of you next week in some way, shape or form. Nigel, Roy and Martin, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on to sort of launch this show. Kind of tricky to cram it into half an hour, but you know, we've made some impact. We've got some fantastic comments from our audience today. Nigel Holmes at Shifka, Roy Stenhouse at NZTC, Martin McCormack at ETZ. Those are the names, those are the organizations. If you like what you heard and you'd like to extend that conversation further, please reach out and connect with these people. They are lovely and they will accept your connection request and extend that conversation. But for now, gentlemen, I'm going to leave it there. All the best in what you're doing. And I'm hoping it's not a year until we meet again to talk about this, but I'm sure when we do, there'll be even more to talk about, right?
Indeed.
Thank you, Eric.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, and we will see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye. And Martin, there we go. It's time now to switch to our industry spotlight section of the show. Wasn't that an excellent headline section? Now we're going to meet some companies that are doing things in the space, that are active in the space. We're going to start by welcoming them to the show. A friend of the show, you've been on twice before, but there's a new latter part to the end of your title there, Mike. Mike Adams, CEO of Elemental Energies. Welcome. Good to have you.
Thanks, Eric.
We have Neil Rimmer from VYSUS Group. Hello, Neil.
Good afternoon, Eric. Good afternoon.
Very good. And we have our last guest to join this band here, Stuart Duncanson from Hydrasun. How you doing, Stuart?
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me on.
You're almost in camouflage there, Stuart. You're just blending into the background. I like it. Fantastic. Thanks for being with us. Mike, we've had you on the show before, and we knew a bit what you were doing before. Can you tell us a bit about the new role and Elemental Energies?
Yeah, I mean, first off, that previous panel, fantastic. Yeah,
it's like yeah, we had the gods of hydrogen with us and CCS.
Yeah, and multiple people mentioned as well just what's going on in Aberdeen right now, and I think a combination of offshore Europe. There's a decarbonization event in October. There's the hydrogen event in October. There's well, it's fair enough. It's in St Andrews, but there's the decom event in November, and yeah. Yeah, what a great place to be based and working.
Absolutely. And I really wasn't joking. I remember, I think my very first offshore Europe in the early 90s, it was walking around, I was looking at yellow trees, ROVs, really cool big stuff. And there was a little scientist with the little leather patches on his tweed jacket trying to wave a flag for hydrogen. Oh, how things have changed. And wait till next week to see what's coming. So what's Elemental's focus these days?
I mean, we are utterly committed to the future of wells infrastructure, wells skills to energy. I think when we're talking about hydrogen and CCS, and we can draw those parallels to oil and gas, but anywhere where there is something that either needs to go underground or needs to come from underground, you need a well. And we can see a huge transfer of those skills and a demand for those skills, starting oil and gas, tackling decommissioning, and then looking forward to CCUS, to geothermal, to hydrogen, and all of those different areas. And we are incredibly passionate about how important that expertise is, because it plays such a critical integrity role in an overall system, all the way from, well, if you look at CCS, particularly from capture to storage, it is going through that infrastructure. It's incredibly important.
Very much so. You don't have to use Google that much to find reports that tell you about how important this is. But one McKinsey report tells us that CCS activity will need to grow 120 times by 2050 before those net zero commitments can be achieved. And one major element which is often overlooked is the role that well infrastructure plays. Why is it overlooked?
I don't know why. It's not overlooked by us, and we're it is good and it is bad. It is utterly essential to store, and in order to get from to move that transport infrastructure onshore, offshore, or however you're doing it, whether it's shipping or pipelines, in order to get into that store, you have to go through wells infrastructure. So it's good in that sense, but it also poses a challenge. Many of these stores are former oil and gas production reservoirs filled with wells. Those wells present opportunity. They can be repurposed, but they also present quite a significant challenge. If you imagine, in the carbon capture context, we're trying to store that forever, arguably, the carbon dioxide. And it is hard to store something filled with holes. So that wells infrastructure, we need it. And in many cases, we'll need to design and implement new infrastructure to withstand, a lot of activity. But we also have to really think carefully about all the old infrastructure that has intersected those reservoirs. And it doesn't matter if they're decommissioned. We still have to really consider that as a potential leak path. And so there's a large number of wells related questions that have to be asked and answered and designed to when you're looking at carbon capture.
Yeah, absolutely. In your article in this month's OGV Energy, you talk about green sand. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, fantastic project. And I think with CCS, that's one of those projects that's kind of captured the imagination. It's a real thing that people can look at. And it's groundbreaking in many ways. We've been involved in a number of different areas that are really, really interesting work for us. And that includes obviously looking at the wells. And there's many different types of well that go into any reservoir. Like I say, they can be abandoned. They can be, production wellbores, injection wellbores, sidetracks, pilot holes from way back in, the 1970s. All of that has to be taken into consideration. We also look at, the rapidly evolving kind of regulation in the space, and a lot of that is changing over the course of, these are big projects, and we're seeing a lot of evolution to that guidance and those regulations as projects advance. So that has to be taken into consideration, which is what we've been doing on green sand. And then for us, it's also been about working really holistically as part of a project team. There's lots of different parts of a CCS system, and even just when you're looking at the wells, there's many different aspects that need to be considered together. And I would actually argue that more globally in a CCS system, from capture all the way through transport to storage, there's a lot of considerations that are really important from an overall system as well. So we've been doing that with green sand, really working as a really close part with all the other engineers on the project.
When you and I spoke on the show last time and the time before that, you were wearing a t-shirt that said it's all about the data. It's all about the data. Are you still wearing that t-shirt? Because you've always said that data issue has always been a challenge. Is data still a challenge? And what are the other challenges you see and opportunities in this space for companies such as yourself?
Yeah, I think, with CCS and with the wells challenge, that, opportunity and challenge in CCS, it really is about understanding what data that you have and what does that mean to you. And, it's about everything from what have you got? What have you inherited? What does that look like? What is the status now versus then when the readings and the data was collected? What do we think the overall system can handle?
Right.
All the wells considered as one. What do we think the overall subsurface system can handle? A lot of these systems are going to be stressed with cyclic loads and, really trying to get the most out of these carbon stores. And a lot of that does come down to the tools and the software that's available to us. And it's still catching up, and it's not even just on the software side. If you look at material qualification on the technology side as well, I mean, we're still catching up to get the tools, both software and physical hardware, that's up to the task. So it's a race. The targets are astronomical that we have to try and meet, and we do really have to try and meet these targets. Carbon capture, CCS as a tool to help meet net zero targets is really fundamental. So it's a race. The engineers are racing, the wells guys are racing, software people are racing, and hopefully we all get there at the same time.
Hopefully we all get there at the same time. Thank you so much, Mike. It's good to have you with us again. Neil, if I can go to you, first time on the show, it's great to have you with us. Neil from VYSUS.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a wee bit, for those who maybe haven't heard, what VYSUS is all about, what you guys are doing?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, I mean, VYSUS, we were obviously carved out from Lloyd's Register. We were Lloyd's Register Energy Group up till 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now. And Mike there sat with Elemental Energies. That was obviously the Wells division of what was Synergy Wells, was one of the parts of LR Energy that's moved across to Elemental. Fundamentally now, as a consulting business, focused on inspections, on risk and asset integrity, along with rig inspections, etc. But what we've seen and what we've targeted to do in terms of the new vision, as it were, in terms of VYSUS, is to focus on being part of energy transition, not simply sitting waiting for the legacy oil and gas where most of us come from. So it's looking at how we can adapt. So the likes of ourselves, in terms of involved directly with the energy transition, it's very much what is happening, following where the industry is moving, and that's very much in the emission space.
Very good, very good. We had your CEO, David Clark, and from VYSUS, and Dominic McCann, CEO of SICAR, on the front of cover of this month's magazine. They give a very insightful interview, and right at the top of that interview, they talk about DataBox and its ability to enable carbon scoring. Can you tell us a wee bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, it's been touched on slightly in the previous section, where the Whitby Village, in terms of had to be cancelled because people didn't trust the hydrogen. And we are, to a certain extent, on an OGV call, preaching to the choir in terms of the oil and gas industry. But step outside that oil and gas industry, and people don't believe the oil and gas industry's emissions figures. That's the bottom line. You know, the wider society has distrust to figures because essentially they've been able to mark their own homework. So with limited trust, you know, you need to get to verifiability, and that's very much been driven by regulation. So as regulation is moving, so the likes of ISSB, etc., coming in, and the inclusion of Scope 3 emissions, what has been reported in the past as a nice to have, or we can do it and we can just catch it up and do it in a few spreadsheets, it doesn't really matter. Suddenly, you've fundamentally got to get a proper carbon footprint of what you're doing. And when it comes to hydrogen CCS, it won't be accepted by wider society that here it is, we've just made up the number. Where's the verifiability of that number? It suddenly becomes complex because you've got to incorporate, as the EU calls it, the value chain, so the upstream and downstream effects of what you're doing. So you've got to encompass a lot more of your emissions profile to get a true carbon footprint. So to refer back to the previous conversation in terms of utilising the terms blue and green hydrogen, that's simply not accepted in the US. You know, it's what is the carbon emissions associated with that hydrogen production. Okay. The same for the EU. The terminology is easy for the description of these things, but if you're going to produce hydrogen, methane reformation, then you're going to have to show what the emissions are associated with that. You know, there is a crossover. Hydrogen is a greenhouse gas, a secondary greenhouse gas, so leaks associated with it are another problem. And you've got to drill down to, these are the real numbers, this is verifiability. And what we've done is, with DataBox, we've partnered with a technology provider down in Edinburgh, an IT company, SICAR, and essentially built upon the sort of 20 plus years of measuring and validating EU ETS figures and adapting that to the existing data you've already got. What is your consumption? What have you got in your ERP? What other emission figures have you got? Your consumption, your activity, to bring forward a verifiable and auditable emissions profile for companies. And that allows that confidence to then stand and argue the case for hydrogen and CCS. Without that, we're back to how we believed down in London or how we believed in Brussels. And that's the major challenge, is making it believable to wider society that it's not just a way to keep the oil and gas companies in profit.
Do you think that Brexit and our association with the EU now is going to become a stumbling block or an enabler?
Actually, there's two sides to that. It will become a slight challenge in terms of the hydrogen movement to the EU. You know, we're outside the EU, so the carbon border adjustment mechanism will apply to hydrogen produced in the UK. However, if the regulations in the UK, if they adapt and the level of scrutiny on the hydrogen production matches the EU, there won't necessarily be a border tax adjustment made. However, that does require hydrogen production to be verified at site by site. So it's not just this country or what country. So there's challenges associated with that, but at the same time, there's benefits and advantages because it's from source to delivery. So if you're going to bring in hydrogen produced in the Middle East into Germany, for example, one of the big buyers of the future hydrogen market, all that compression, the conversion to ammonia, the shipping, etc., is going to come off that balance sheet in terms of what the carbon intensity is. So you're going to end up with a higher carbon border tax price for that. Whereas if you're piping it from Scotland, you know, you don't have to go through anywhere near the same hurdles. You do have the potential for the pipeline to apply storage in terms of variable pressure. So you're going to have in an advantageous position over imports that have to come by sea. So that whilst there are the downside in terms of you do need to get your figures verifiable down to plant level and plant size, that also supports the use of hydrogen or production of hydrogen in Scotland versus imported from be it the Middle East or be it from the US.
Fascinating stuff and lots to think about on the wider scale. I agree that it's very exciting to be involved in it all, but there are deeper roots to be looked at with all of this in terms of certification and planning. So thank you very much for that, Neil. Stuart, if I could move to you, Stuart Duncanson, Technology Manager for Hydrogen at Hydrasun. Hydrasun's a very well-known name in the industry. I feel as if it's one of those brands that's just been about the whole time I've been involved. Could you give us a reminder of where Hydrasun today fit? We might have an idea of what we thought Hydrasun were. What's Hydrasun all about today in the energy industry value chain?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think people are aware of Hydrasun. In the last 50 years, have been involved in providing fluid transfer solutions into the oil and gas market. And that's given us a good base. I think we're one of those companies now that are seeking to make that energy transition. And we have a lot of the sort of key core skills required for some of the hydrogen production, hydrogen refueling solutions that are happening in the market. So we are the largest supplier of Harker Hannafin equipment in Europe. So small bore tubing, instrumentation, valving, etc. And that's given us a good starting point. So in about 2016, we were approached by ITM Power at the time to start supporting them in terms of their hydrogen refueling station rollout. And we did a number of installations in terms of the stations across Europe for them, and small bore tubing, interconnecting pipe work, balance of plant. But we've been gradually building up that capability till now, where we have a full EPC team, and we're targeting some of those green hydrogen projects that are emerging in the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, where we actually have a design team. We work with vendors, we design station of the plant, and we're seeking to actually construct it. So a big change over the last 50 years, but a really exciting change for the company.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating in your article in this month's magazine to read about, how deep there are companies that, they do a couple of projects in perhaps another aspect of industry, and they all write that bit of the industry in biro at the end of their business cards. Like we do one job in renewables and suddenly we're an oil and gas services provider and renewables. But you guys are going full on into this. You're becoming a major player, a major supplier into it as well. But also things like the thing that fascinated me, the new Hydrogen Training Academy in Aberdeen. Yeah,
absolutely. I think we've dabbled within the training exercise, in terms of providing small bore tubing, etc. in the past. We've been extremely lucky that Scottish Government, Scottish Enterprise have supported us in the development of this new facility. And we're kind of focused in on that just transition that Martin McCormack mentioned in the last panel session, where he talked about training up oil and gas skills for alternative energies. We've got a similar opinion. We think that, from a maintenance, a small bore tubing type approach, most of the technicians in oil and gas carry 90% of those skills required to support hydrogen production. And the purpose of the training centre is to give them that exposure to hydrogen and help them basically set up and transition and support those projects as they emerge. So we're generating courses at the moment in and around hydrogen awareness, hydrogen safety. We're doing more sort of safety passport related stuff as well. We'll be the first provider in the northeast of the CCNSG safety passport course. But we're also doing very hands-on specific training, pressure testing, helium leak testing. That's very important skills in order to commission and test a refueling station, as an example. So really exciting stuff. And ultimately what we'd like to see is almost a full hydrogen production, hydrogen refueling station facility at that training centre. Wow. And actually have technicians come in and actually learn hands-on to be able to maintain the infrastructure that's been put in place.
You've also got a new facility which has got hydrogen capability or hydrogen fringes to it in Glasgow, right?
Yeah, we've actually just expanded that again. So we'd opened a second facility in Glasgow 12 months ago, targeted specifically at hydrogen production, hydrogen manufacture. We've actually outgrown that with the design team. So we've actually taken a third office. We've got a third office now with space for another 40 engineers in it. So you can see the level of growth. We've gone from having about 7 or 8 people when I joined 12 months ago now to almost 70 people involved in the hydrogen market. So a massive growth and huge opportunities to continue to grow into the market.
Fantastic. I'm sure there's going to be a good representation from yourself and your colleagues around offshore Europe next week to extend that conversation.
We will be up and about, and we look forward to talking to people.
Absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna pick up on a question here from Jonathan Jones. I won't be able to get all of it on the screen. I'll get some of it on the screen. Couldn't agree more with it's all about the data for CCS and hydrogen, and more broadly the energy transition. Is any of this really possible / viable without a solid data digital infrastructure? Where are the opportunities to pilot tech? I'll just close that and read out the rest of that. Where are the opportunities to pilot technology within leading CCS hydrogen projects? Mike, do you want to grab that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, like I said, the kind of evolution of the kind of data and digital infrastructure, the evolution of the regulation, it's all intertwined. The regulation is also evolving just as fast, and that affects our ability to invest and companies' ability to invest in all sorts, from software to hardware, because the technology side as well, the physical technology that's used in these projects is also evolving just as fast. And I think in every big project, certainly every big project that we work on, there is a responsibility to look at, what technology does this project need? What is available? What is the readiness of that technology? And we all have to play a part in continually assessing, the readiness and the kind of the testing, the implementation of that technology, and having an open mind of how these projects will be delivered, because things are advancing so rapidly. So we need to have a continual view of the regulation, of the software, of the hardware, and actually how do we implement these projects.
Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you. I'm sure if it's not yourselves, maybe it will be yourselves. Are you going to be around for Offshore Europe next week?
Yes, will be. Yes.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So Neil from VYSUS Group, Mike from Elemental Energy, Stuart from Hydrasun, thank you so much for joining us. Please, for our guests today, if you heard something, wells, ESG, environmental sustainability certification, and hydrogen technology, equipment and training facilities and all of that, pick up the conversation with these guys, reach out and connect and grab them over the next week or weeks and months. Thank you so much for being with us today, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Now we're going to move to our Market Watch section of the show. We've got a slight hydrogen flavour to this. We're going to welcome, for the first time to the show, Joyce Grigory, Director of Hydrogen at Westwood Global Energy. Hi, Joyce. How are you?
Well, thank you very much. Hello, everyone.
Thank you very much. It's good to have you with us. And Diveena Danablalan, who's just becoming a cornerstone of this show now, aren't you? You really are. You just can't keep away.
I try to be, definitely. Unfortunately, I'm going to be off from Friday.
You're going to be off from Friday, and we wish you all the best with that. But also, you give me a heart attack every time because you're so cool with this show that you just drop in literally a couple of seconds before you're due on air. But you're very good, and you're both very welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today, Joyce. As our newest face from Westwood, we thought we'd go to you first, if that's okay. We saw recent announcements that the UK government has selected a short list of hydrogen projects, and we've heard about some of that activity there today. Can you give the audience that's with us today a wee bit of context behind this negotiation stage that we're in?
Yeah, exactly. So Nigel mentioned a little bit about this at the very start of the program, but I think it's also kind of helpful for the audience who are probably a little bit less familiar with some of the funding that's available, just to kind of run through very briefly, what that looks like. Now, the government they set aside a £240 million fund as part of a net zero hydrogen fund to really support both blue and green hydrogen projects. And that fund is split into 4 different strands. The first 2 are really focused on providing DevEx and CapEx support. And there were 2 rounds that were held. The results of the first round were announced at the end of March, and there were 15 successful applicants. 15 of the projects were green, and 2 of them were blue. And then round 2 opened shortly after those results were announced. And the applications for that round closed in, I think it was around June time. And the results from that round are actually pretty imminent. I think they're due at around middle of September. But in addition to the strands 1 and 2, there's also strands 3 and 4. And this is for the support of CCUS and non-CCUS projects that not only require the CapEx support, but they require ongoing revenue support, which is provided through the government's business models. And they have 2. They have 1 for hydrogen and 1 for CCS. Okay. And so kind of coming back to your initial question, the announcement that you mentioned refers to the hydrogen allocation round, or the HAR1 as it's called. And that falls under the strand 3. Really providing support for the green hydrogen projects. And it's really the first of, the government has said they're going to be issuing annual allocation rounds. Now, the applications for HAR1 opened last year. In March this year, that was shortlisted to 20 projects that were invited to proceed to the due diligence stage. And now that's been whittled down to 17 projects, which are, proceeding to this kind of final negotiation stage.
When do you expect this negotiation stage to conclude, and what are the next steps?
So there's still some Q&A type of activities that are ongoing this month. The projects need to submit additional responses to the government in September. And once that activity is done, the government is expected to award the contracts in Q4 of this year, which basically means that the developers have the green light to crack on with their projects and work towards getting them operational by 2025. And HAR1 looks to support up to 250 megawatts of green hydrogen capacity in this particular round. And if you add up all the capacity of the 17 projects, it's just over 250 megawatts. So there's still a little bit of potential for maybe another project to not go ahead, or there might be some slight changes on the capacity of some of the announced projects. But in general, you would assume that the majority of that list is now already set. And so it's really down to the negotiations. Then in terms of what happens afterwards, so beyond the HAR1, the government really want to move very quickly, and they want to hold a second allocation around the HAR2 in Q4 this year. So after they make the announcements for the contracts, and the 3 projects that withdrew from the HAR1 had actually been invited to reapply for the HAR2. And the government has run a consultation to make some improvements on the HAR1 process and to kind of shape what the HAR2 is going to look like. And they're currently reviewing some of the comments around that. But essentially what they want to do is award the contracts in 2025 for up to 750 megawatts of green hydrogen capacity, which needs to be operational between the timeframe of 2026 to 2029. So together, these 2 allocation rounds represent a gigawatt, or around 20% of the UK's green hydrogen target for 2030. Then after HAR2, the government is hoping to kind of move away from this co-support model where they're supporting both CapEx and ongoing revenue support to maybe one where they're just based on revenue support or market-based support. But that's still kind of a little bit way off in the future, and really it depends largely on how the market's going to evolve.
Very good. Thank you so much for that. On carbon capture, utilization and storage, what are you seeing in terms of development for projects in the UK?
Yeah, so I think Martin touched a little bit on the Acorn project. The government has targeted to have four CCS clusters throughout the UK operational by 2030. And they selected 2 of those clusters as part of the Track 1 process. And the clusters that got selected were the East Coast Cluster, which is underpinned by the Northern Endurance Partnership, BP, and that's decarbonizing the Teesside region. And the second of those projects was HyNet in the northwest of the UK, and that's decarbonizing the Manchester and Liverpool regions. Then you have Track 2, so that's to decide the remaining 2 CCUS clusters. And they were announced in the end, and the clusters that got selected were Acorn in Scotland and Viking CCS, which is just south of the Northern Endurance Partnership, and it's a bit closer to the Humber region, which is kind of the another major industrial cluster for decarbonization. But we also know that the Solent cluster, which is in the south by Southampton, as well as the Morecambe cluster, which is north of HyNet, also submitted letters of or expressions of interest, as they call them, during the Track 2 process. So essentially, we already have certainty over which of the 4 UK clusters the government is going to be targeting. And just to kind of round that off and touch on one of Nigel's point earlier that he mentioned at the start of the program is just how intrinsically linked the development of both like the CCS clusters and the blue hydrogen projects are, because you essentially have like each cluster has one major blue hydrogen project, at its core, and that blue hydrogen project really serves as the anchor project that provides a steady stream of CO2 to the carbon store. So it's actually pretty crucial that you have these 2 aspects of the project moving in tandem, because you can't really have one without the other.
Very good. Absolutely excellent insight into what you're seeing in hydrogen and carbon capture projects. Diveena, I thought it'd be good to check in with you. What are some of the major trends, significant trends that you are seeing on your side for hydrogen carbon capture projects?
So I thought, I guess, because Joyce is covering the UK, I'm going to cover rest of the world, sort of. Obviously not in 5 minutes. However, I think I can say from our data, the good news is that we're actually seeing, in terms of proposed projects at least, the numbers are going to exceed last year's figures, definitely. Right. So we're only just coming into September, and at the end of Q2, we've already seen more than 80% of the number of projects recorded in 2022. So this is, for us, signals that is very promising. However, the issue is a little bit, despite the fact that there is high capex associated with both hydrogen and carbon capture. So for hydrogen, we're estimating over $630 billion of spend on the sector alone, globally up to 2030. The reality is that actually, in terms of FIDs, so final investment decisions, we've actually seen relatively few over the past 2 years. So to put this in some kind of perspective here, we've seen around $13.7 billion in spend associated with around 35 FIDs. And this is over the past 2 years. And the majority of the spend was actually associated with just one project. So that's Saudi Arabia's NEOM. So that's around $10 billion. And that indicates, obviously, that the others were much smaller scale projects. And then I guess when you look more closely at those 2 figures, you've got 630 billion versus 14 billion committed. It's barely 2% of the expected spend. So we clearly have a long way to go in order to meet the commitments globally. And it's a very similar picture when we look at the stage of projects actually associated with the sector. Very few are actually in the construction phase. So around 75% of the projects that we're tracking are in very early stages. So this is feasibility and conceptual design versus around 15%, which are in EPC phase. So this to us does sort of signal that there is a lack of investor confidence actually in the sector, which is slowing progress to a certain extent. And I would actually go so far as to say the story is quite similar in carbon capture as well. Over the past 2 years, we've seen FIDs declared on less than 10 projects worldwide, according to our data. Majority of these are actually associated with the USA. And this is out of the potential 270 projects worldwide. And I guess similarly to hydrogen, carbon capture projects are struggling to move into final investment decision and construction phase due to, basically, as Joyce mentioned, there is the need for other parts of the system to be working at the same time as these. So these are the storage and transportation elements of these projects. And there's a lot of focus at the moment that we're noticing on the capture element, but not so much on these other elements, which need to be developed too. Also, of course, you've got various issues around markets for demand that need to be better developed. We can see this is now happening for hydrogen nowadays, with agreements being signed between nations. So for instance, this year we saw Netherlands signing multiple contracts with Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and Spain as of this year for hydrogen. And also, I guess quite critically, the business models, of course, need to be finalized. And those aren't uniform across the globe either. So in short, it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag. I know I'm making it sound a bit more critical than it actually is. However,
you're only saying what you see.
I know I can only say what the data is showing at the moment, which is the fact that there is plenty of interest at the moment. Definitely the political will is there. The developer will is there. And there are plenty of projects in the pipeline for both of these sectors. It's just that the timelines around these projects and also the financing elements are the biggest unknowns at the moment.
Any other markets or areas we should be interested in right now? Anything you want to tell us about that's showing interest?
Yeah, actually. So I did mention, I guess, previously the US. So that's an area that we're keeping quite a close eye on. And it's not just because of the boost from IRA, actually. So we've seen these projects continue before IRA in terms of moving into construction phase. And it has seen the highest amount of project activity around carbon capture FIDs over the last 2 years. And it also ranks third, according to our data, in terms of potential spend on hydrogen projects up to 2030. And this is behind Australia and Egypt. It's also the country which has the highest number of projects in the construction phase globally as well, across both sectors, in fact. And we're seeing movement across several projects, such as the Beaumont Blue Hydrogen Plant, which involves Linde, the Elk Hills Carbon Capture Plant involving Fleur and NextDecade. So this actually recently received funding from the DOE. And also the Permian Basin Direct Air Capture Project, which also received funding from the DOE. And it involves Technip Energies, Siemens Energy, and Worley. So these are just like some of the projects to watch out for the US. Also, can't obviously go off hydrogen without mentioning Australia. Main aim for Australia, of course, is to become main exporter of hydrogen by 2030. And that's going to achieve production under, they say, $2 to Australian dollars per kilogram. And the adoption of these hydrogen hubs basically appears to be key here. And there's already been financial commitments by the government to fund 7 hubs for early stage development. And according to our data, we're expecting to see over 71 billion worth of capex spend across over 80 projects in Australia by 2030.
Crikey.
No, I know. So there is a significant opportunity there, shall we say. It's just, once again, it's a timeline.
Struth. Diveena, I asked our headline guests if Scotland's been taken seriously as a contributor to this whole hydrogen CCUS world. What are you seeing as where the UK ranks in the world in this?
So, I mean, if we're talking about supply chain, the UK supply chain is very well known globally for having proven expertise in hydrogen and carbon capture, especially when it comes to the engineering side. There is obviously a lot of ambition from other nations to become world leaders in hydrogen and implement carbon capture technologies and, of course, boost their own domestic supply chains. And there is a little bit of a worry at the moment, I think, that the UK is beginning to start lagging behind compared to other nations, especially when it comes to financial commitments, both to these projects and also to helping the supply chain achieve this. It's no secret, FIDs for UK projects, it's already been mentioned, it's slipped to the beginning of 2024. However, all of these projects are basically ready to break ground. So as soon as they hit the go button, it's go time, essentially. And RFQs, Joyce mentioned this, they're expected in the second half of this year, so definitely watch that space. It's not too little too late at the moment. So I do think that the UK could still be in that pack of becoming, a world leader in some of these technologies. However, I think that we are realizing that the window is rapidly narrowing as more and more nations begin implementing their growth strategies at a more rapid rate, essentially. And the issue at the moment is we still need clear policy, we still need timelines, and we still need financially viable business models for the sectors to flourish.
On that note, that sobering note, Diveena, we're not going to see you for a while because you're going to be busy for the next couple of months. Very busy.
Yes, I will be, definitely.
Are you able to share with us why?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'm going on maternity leave. So I'm going to be having my daughter mid-September. First child, so it's going to be an interesting learning curve away from doing analytics.
For sure. We wish you all the best with that, and we'll be sure to keep in touch. We might send you the odd question every now and then.
I'll go for it, please do. We'll keep the brain fresh.
Joyce, thank you for your insight from Westwood Global Energy Group today. Diveena, as usual, thank you for your insight from EIC. If you'd like to extend those questions and that conversation, please get in touch with these two wonderful people. But for now, Joyce and Diveena, thank you very much. It's been excellent. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Bye. Now, if you are in any way involved in the energy sector, as most of our audience will be, you will no doubt know, it can't go without being noticed, that next week is SPE Offshore Europe. It's back. 2023, it's back. We've been waiting for 4 years for this. It's the 50th anniversary. So we thought it'd be nice to check in with the person who is at the leading edge of putting all of this together. Please welcome Jonathan Heasty from RX Global. How are you doing, Jonathan?
I'm brilliant. Thank you very much. How are you, Eric? Are you good?
I'm great. You've been sitting in that green room, breathing in all this hydrogen for over an hour. How are you feeling? Are you okay?
I'm feeling a little bit high, to be honest. No, it's great. I mean, it's been really, really good listening to the panelists. I think it shows, and I hope this is manifested in next week's Offshore Europe, how the industry has changed over the 4 long years that we haven't been around. There's been a lot of development. There's obviously challenges, but there's a huge amount of opportunity, exciting opportunity that we've listened to today. And I guess that sums up what next week, I hope, will bring to all of the wonderful people that are coming, including, I hope, most of the people that are watching this session today.
Oh, absolutely. The attendees and our guests and the viewers. Now, just to put this in context, you and your team do Offshore Europe.
Yes.
That's it.
Indeed.
Yeah,
well, we do lots of different shows involved in other events as well, including in renewables, but we've got SPE, obviously, that we work with as our partner, who put together the conference program as well. So yes, so for 4 long years, particularly in the context of Offshore Europe, we've been getting out of bed every morning, and we sit now at the pinnacle, hopefully, of delivering a huge amount of value and knowledge to everybody that's attending next week. I'm excited. I'm ready to pop.
I bet. I mean, I'm guessing in terms of preparations, you're pretty much done. But how's it going? How's it all shaping up?
It's shaping up really well. I mean, I expect it to be very similar to the scale of what it was in 2019, but with a different vibe. So just to echo what I was saying, and again to echo the subject matter that we've all been learning about, the event has includes this time a huge amount of energy transition focus. The conference, obviously, as you would expect, put together superbly by SPE and various committees, is touching on lots of transition technologies and areas. Hydrogen and carbon capture come up numerous times. Geothermal is there, and you'll learn a huge amount across that program, not just the keynote strategic sessions that are running, but also the technical streams as well. And it's very much put together by the industry for the industry. I think I'm right in saying, and please don't quote me if I'm not, that it is the only free-to-attend SPE conference anywhere on the planet. So when you think about what's going to be delivered, you think about the brilliant speakers, the knowledge that you can tap into. I would encourage everybody to get down there. It only takes your time and hopefully a few pennies to travel to see us all in Aberdeen next week, and you can feast on all of the knowledge and expertise, some of which you've enjoyed today. I can tell you that the gods of hydrogen that you referenced, at least 2 of them, are live with us next week, and all 3 organizations are definitely there. The EIC indeed are there as well. So please do come along. And then away from the conference, we've got obviously the exhibition, which is packed full of around 800 different exhibitors. This time round, as well as the traditional upstream oil and gas, we've got a trail that's highlighting, I think at the minute, 121 of those exhibitors that have got solutions that can help accelerate our transition towards net zero today. There's at least it's all twos and ones. There's 121 exhibitors, and I know at the minute there's 211 products from those 121 exhibitors. It's almost binary, but not quite. That are transition focused. So again, you can see in the 4 years that we've been away, there's a real growing, surging undercurrent of transition, blending with the traditional energies that we have at the show.
And it sounds very much. I mean, I wasn't joking when I went. Well, maybe slightly joking, but there was a day when I used to go to offshore Europe and things like that. There was loads of yellow steel work and people with big chunky valves and things, and a little scientist sitting saying, "What about hydrogen? This is really cool." And people are like, "Yeah, but look at this ROV. It's fabulous."
Yeah.
You are talking about a blend at this particular show, aren't you?
Yeah, very much so. And on the show floor, apart from the exhibitors and the hunt, I mean, we've got 13 pavilions coming in from outside the UK, international and regional groups. Lots of exhibitors as well. Obviously, a very strong UK and Scottish representation. But in between all of the kit that they're going to be showcasing across the energy industry, there's also a new hydrogen hub. Again, Nigel and Shufka have been helping us put together the program there. You can access that for free. Little bite-sized chunks of knowledge as you do business on the floor. You can tap in and swell your brain and your chance of success as you wander around. There's an offshore wind hub that's brand new, obviously looking at wind, and green hydrogen certainly will be part of that. There's a huge energy transition theatre covering all the different approaches, about 200-seater, 3 times bigger than it was in 19 when it was first introduced. One on future talent that looks at the skills, the people needed to power the transition from a resource perspective, including reskilling existing talent. There's one on future opportunities, which is very much focused on decommissioning of offshore assets, including offshore wind and also late life extension, but also looks at carbon capture and at geothermal. And the EIC, our friends at the EIC, are putting together a collaboration theatre, which is about how the supply chain can work together to tackle the transition and really, accelerate what we're doing. So there is content everywhere. There are people everywhere. There are technologies across the entire gamut of energy to help accelerate our progress to a better energy future. And I beseech everybody, please come down and enjoy this wondrous collection of people, technologies and organizations. It's going to be a fabulous week, and I'm thrilled that it's sunny in Aberdeen at the minute. Absolutely. Long may that continue.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Jonathan, when you sit down with a blank sheet of paper and a pen and say, right, okay, offshore Europe 2023, when you start to write down all of the chunky kind of business elements and start doing all of that, you must have an idea of how you want the visitor and user experience to be, right? You must be thinking about that. What do you want people to come to the show and then leave with? What do you want them to take away, and how do you want them to feel?
I want them to feel amazing, obviously, and if they aren't after this session with all of your esteemed speakers, then what will get them there. But I want people. We put on this event, and as I said, you can attend it free of charge. You can wander around the exhibition halls. You can go to any of the sessions upstairs on the show floors, totally free, and you can come away, I hope, having learned a huge amount, having gained an immense amount of inspiration and knowledge that you can put into play, not just in the future, but today, to drive your own development, your own career, your own organization's development, and obviously the industry in general. So and then meet loads of people, reconnect with people perhaps you haven't seen for 4 years since the last offshore Europe. Yeah. And that serendipitous bumping into people that you never knew you needed to know, but suddenly you do, and you're working with them, new business models, new financing models, new partners, new collaborations. So I think that's the value of face-to-face that we've been missing, and certainly offshore Europe hasn't had the ability to deliver for 4 years. So please don't miss out on it. Come and feast and grab all that value and benefit. Please, please, please.
Please. If you're not energized about offshore Europe after that, I don't know what will get you energized. Jonathan, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. We wish you and all the team, all the very best, all your presenters, all your contributors. We've got a presence there, our members have a presence there, and we can't wait to get there and get it set up. So all the best with it. And maybe we'll do a little, this is what you were like before. Let's catch you afterwards, a before and after session with you to see you're exhausted lying.
I shall be asleep.
Yes.
Anyway,
a month.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good to see you next week.
Thank you. See you next week. Ta-ta. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. We have come to the end of our show. Just a few closing words for me. A big thank to all our guests today. Wasn't that absolutely fantastic with all our hydrogen specialists on and people who are active in the industry. Thank you to our audience, your viewers, for if you've been with us before, thanks for coming back. If you're new to the show, thanks for joining us. We hope you got something from it. Our winner for the best comment of the day, I just choose them at random. I star a few purely based on the level of response that came back. We're going to go with Gavin McGill. So Gavin, you are, let me just make sure I got that right. Gavin, you are our winner of the comment today. I'll be in touch with you to organise a free half page in a forthcoming issue of the magazine. Our theme for next month is digital transformation. Now, we're going to be, OGV Energy are going to be en masse at ADIPEC. So we're going to be doing a live business breakfast in person, OGV Energy business breakfast in person. We're going to record that, and we will post a link to the recording of that as the live on digital transformation next month, because we won't be streaming it from there, but we will record it and do that. On ADIPEC, we've got the last few remaining opportunities for those still wondering if you're heading to ADIPEC or not. If you'd like to join our golf event at Yas Island, our business breakfast at the Aloft Hotel, or our drinks reception at the Aloft Hotel, it would be well worth a call to Andy Mackay. I can put up his details in 1 second right here. Captions, where is Andy Mackay? He is right here. And I think there are a few opportunities left on the stand, just a few, so you'll have to be quick. andy.mackay@ogvenergy.co.uk, 01224 084 114. That is the number. And if you want to get involved in any of our other activities around ADIPEC, please look at the events page on OGV Energy's website, which is right here, OGV Energy/events. And you can sign up to be part of that. We're going to be back with this show on the 26th of October, where our theme will be international growth, and we'll have some wonderful guests lined up for you then. For now, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a wonderful show. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks to everyone, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.